thank you all for coming out to Marama Hall on this lovely winter afternoon. I'm going to read for you some poetry that I've composed while I've been the Castleberg Trust Artist in Residence out in Broad Bay. And these poems are inspired by the sketches of Anthony Watson. He was writing a cello concerto when he died, and these sketches are held in the Hocken collection, and I've used some of his annotations on the sketches as starting points for these poems, so I hope you enjoy them. Sketches for a posthumous cello concerto. 1. Illegible. Initially, the marks seem flat, opaque, impenetrable, a monolith of coarse capitals in anger, or else the swimming cursive, two faces, each turned away. But gradually the rhythms appear, become visible, an alien alphabet, a tortured Southland vernacular, squaring into focus. You begin to see larger shapes, connections and fragmentations, as if they had always been there, clustered in the harmonic field. 2. Make the cello labour even to keep his head above. As succinct a portrait as this, pulling down that most striving of creatures with two hands, forcing him under, the notes too are laboured, wrung out in careful matrices, inverted, transposed and retrograded, in preparation for heavy work, for heaving upward, in preparation as bricks, carefully sanded down at every possible angle. Not simply to labour, but to make labour, to cause to labour, to bring about the perfect conditions for struggle. There is no room here for facility, only grafting, manufacture, heavy marks on the parchment, repeated downward strokes across the strings, repeated hammer blows. 3. Aleatory, nasty. An alley cattery, a nest eel with a Tory nose, nah, steal Theodore, he must yell a Tarina, steer-like dynasty, leak around us, teal factories in a sky, a Lee Dory narcissist, he'll eat nori origami, missed the lottery, nah, steep. 4. Employ a structure of disintegration, then a rebuilding. As succinct as pulling down that most striving of, with two forcing under, the two are laboured, wrung out and careful, inverted, transposed and retrograded, in for heavy, for upward, in as carefully sanded down at every possible, not simply to labour, but to make labour, to cause to labour, to bring out the perfect, for is no here for only heavy on the repeated downward across the repeated this portrait creatures, hands, hymn, notes, matrices, preparation, work, heaving, preparation, bricks, angle, conditions, struggle, there, room, facility, grafting, manufacture, marks, parchment, strokes, strings, hammer, blows. 5. After all the strife, a joyful dance. With two hands, as if two different men, the cursive flickers up the page, the line a light, a tarantella, a bounding minuet, the syncopations layered up and set on the wind. 6. Let it be swamped easily. To recognise the futility of order even in such a task as this, to tempt the gods of chaos with a foothold. After all those tightly spinning lines, there is the hint of a loose end, or perhaps not a loose end at all, but only an inevitable resting point. Knowing creation is that point where something might coalesce out of nothing, out of everything, the point where the world might become discrete. 7. There are 12 of these, by the way. 7. Colours merging. You are covered in a space blanket, making a brave, though ridiculous, excursion into a blare of sunlight. You are in a Harriet Mullen poem between Scylla and Charybdis, but opposite a gaggle of neologisms. You are cooking with both butter and olive oil, and the pan is sticking. You are on the surface of the harbour, teeming with rain. You are trapped in the slow movement of a symphony for vocoders. You blink every time you hear a sound you don't recognise. You are an actual, real-life event flanked by dreams. You are writing a eulogy for someone only other people know. You are both sides of your brain at once. You don't know where one stops and the next begins. You are writing a eulogy using letters cut from a Women's Day magazine. You are an actual dream flanked by real-life events. You blink every time you hear a Harriet Mullen poem. You are trapped in a blare of sunlight, a photon symphony. You are on the surface of a frying pan, caramelized between Scylla and Charybdis. You are cooking using only the right side of the brain. You can't believe it's not butter and other excursions in marketing, or you are conceived in a space blanket. 8. More and more brilliant. Each tightly coiled, flashing, each whirl of jagged expectation points upward towards a bright doom, towards the sudden exit of a dream, but also backwards to the flinted spark, the trigger point, the lonely grit, without which nothing more to burnish. 9. Rhythms eventually become too complex. Pick up Duke on black rhythms eventually becomes too complex with him. Even Julie, a big toucan, flex riff, dim savant. You all become too gormless, gorbless, God bless. Perspex rhythms, eventually a pygmy toucan, eventually a pickup Duke, and offend you early, often you're off in your alley, becoming too complex. Pick up in the God bless, prick up in the goddess writhing, brick oven the oddest ripe ink, break open thud, strobe, pink, Bray Gibbons, stethoscopic. 10. Finish this fragment. The fragment is unfinished. The fragment is never finished. It can never be finished. It is by nature unfinished. A fragment is by nature unfinished. Finish it. Finish this fragment. Frankly, you meant to finish. You had always meant to finish. It would have been only natural for you to have finished, in fact, or rather it would have been only natural both for you to finish it and for it to be unfinished, to remain unfinished, by you, by anyone, an immovable object and an irresistible force, the smallest, most dogged, complete, incomplete object that can remain independent, the smallest possible particle even, and the strongest, most irresistible connective force, a finishing force and an object defined by its complete incompleteness. Initially it felt possible for it to be finished. Initially the fragment suggested its own completion. The first edit has an arrow. The first edit is an idea in the top of your head. The first edit is necessarily a myth, a necessary myth, a myth of necessity, the myth that an idea that the world, that you, might be complete, whole, finished, possessing the coherence, the connectedness that only a myth could sustain. You are finished, and the fragment remains. 11. Mark making. At the 11th hour, everything that had been left, abandoned, cast aside, is remembered, returned to, recollected. Everything concealed, uncovered. There is a long, indrawn breath, and for the longest time, no exhalation whatsoever. Like the cold that hangs in the air before a snowstorm, a caesura that gleams with anticipation. Only silence, can activate the sound that surrounds it, or rather the sound that inhabits it, decorates it. Is time itself not simply silence overlaid with tiny disturbances, as the universe is space, a blank void peppered with objects? The 11th hour, the air before the snowstorm, surrounds itself in silence, inhabits it. Only then is it all-encompassing enough to see what might come next, the next mark, the next utterance. A Zen calligrapher waits years for the right moment to recollect, return, remember, uncover, to compress her silent pilgrimage into a single swoop or hook or slash, all the weight of listening, looking, feeling, all the tiniest inflections of the traffic noise, the grooves and patternings in the surface of the sea, the vibrations of fingertips, all this stored away and at the appointed time thrust forward into the void, transformed, exhaled. 12. Finale rhythm, very augmented and tranquillo. The ending, a glass sanctuary, perhaps much like the space I work from now. A low bass fog smothers in from the hills to a boat shed huddled in the bay, its French doors wedged back, a narrow lick of timber jutting out, the colander a kitchen water clock, the surface of the sea layered away, but lapping together, gradually embalming the foundations. Thank you.